Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the All Systems Go podcast. I'm your host, Chris L. Davis, and just thank you. Thank you for your continued listenership, everyone. Today, I've got a very necessary conversation, I'll say. All right. Our guest today is Mike Clayton, and he is Dr. Mike Clayton. He is a project manager and founder of onlinepmcourses.com and a presenter of the Successful Project Management YouTube channel. By the way, I was on LinkedIn just the other day and I saw another company shouting out Mike, and they was having his videos in their promo. It appeared to be a promo. So very well known in the space. And as a PM trainer, he's trained many thousands of learners, and his books have sold nearly 100,000 copies. His introductory PM book is How to Manage a Great Project. And everyone, the reason why I've got Mike with us today is because I've got project management experience in terms of witnessing the benefits of it, working with startups, and even in my corporate experience. And I feel like there's a gap. There's a misunderstanding at times on the importance, the power, and how to properly leverage project management skills. So Mike is on today, everyone, to help us navigate this project management space, not from a technological perspective, but more from a application methodology perspective. So I couldn't think of anyone better than the doctor himself. Mike, welcome to the podcast. How you doing?
Chris, it's a delight to be here. I'm absolutely fine and looking forward to speaking with you.
Yes, yes. So let me ask you this, Mike. How was did you always was it always project management, or did you start elsewhere and kind of find your way into it?
That's a good question. I guess it sort of was and it sort of wasn't. So I started, in terms of work, for many, many years, my plan was to be an academic in the world of physics. As you said, I'm a doctor, I did my PhD, and I always planned to go into academia. But as an undergraduate, I'd done what I now know of as projects, particularly event management, and I got a real buzz out of them. And when it came to kind of making my mind up on applying for permanent lectureships at universities, something in me said, actually, let's try going into industry. And I went into consulting. And so I became a management consultant. And very early on, I remember saying to my boss, what's project management? And he said, "Oh, you don't need to worry about that." And I said, "Well, I want to be a project manager once I'd figured that out." And he said, "Well, we can't, we don't have a training course for you. Don't worry about it at some time." And eventually, the firm that I was working for merged into, was acquired by what was then Touche Ross, which is now Deloitte. So I joined Deloitte Consulting and joined the project management team there. As it happens, got kind of headhunted from the government consulting business to the project management business, and so I got proper training, and it was that frustration that my boss told me, "Well, we can't train you. We don't have a course for you to go on. We haven't got the budget to send you on an outside course." That actually led me to really focus on, in the last sort of 8 or so years, on the online PM courses business, to provide courses for people who are like I was, whose businesses can't or will not train them, so they want to go out and get their training. But I think I probably have always had the mindset of a project manager. A few years ago, I wrote an article about what I learned about project management from my father, and my father was a shopkeeper.
Okay. Okay.
But lots of things that he did and said, and his approaches, are what I would now recognize as good project management kind of approaches to things. So I guess I've always had that kind of ability to see how to plan things into stages and take things and pay attention to risk and all the things that we have to do as project managers to make things happen successfully, and to assure ourselves that something uncertain is going to turn out, or is likely to turn out, all right,
Yes.
which is really what project management's all about.
Yeah, and I want to set the table for everybody and even myself, so everyone know that I'm here as a learner as well. And the context I like to create is the story of two startups that shall remain nameless. You have startup A and startup B. Startup A is a proponent of project management. They take project managers per department, and you've got multiple project managers. The project managers are meeting with the leadership team to ensure that everything is aligned. Then you have startup B that is opposed to project management. And their ethos and philosophy is, hey, you're a professional, manage yourself. You manage your own projects and make sure things get done. Now, what I experienced was startup A that had a project manager, things just tended to flow smoother. Deadlines were able to be hit more consistently, and then the ones without was more siloed. There were
Yeah.
things still getting done, but the schedules didn't align. It was hard to keep in communication with all departments, and then externally, I don't know if users or customers felt it, but it was very disjointed. So I look at that experience and realize I'm a proponent of project management. So that's one piece. But two is, Mike, when it comes to building a business, they'll tell you, hey, you need a VA, you need a graphic designer, you need a web developer, and now they even got, hey, you maybe need an OBM, an online business manager, which I have feelings about, which is a whole nother topic. But you have all of these things. What you don't hear is, hey, you should have a project manager. You need a project manager for that. Um,
Yeah.
so with that being said, I want to give you the floor and really talk about the importance of project management. And for those that don't have it, what friction points they're probably experiencing from a
Yeah.
lack thereof.
And I think that's quite an interesting observation about things people tell you should have. And I don't know what the VA market is like in the States. Here in the UK, I mean, it should be an international market because it doesn't matter where your VA is. But a lot of the VAs I see kind of pitching themselves to me is, we'll do project management. And I think the question you have to ask there is, what do they mean by project management? But your example of business A and business B is lovely because what you observed is exactly what I would expect. If you tell everybody to manage their own projects, basically you get a whole raft of behaviors that flow from that. And the first is that people acquire sharp elbows. If they're being incentivized to manage their own projects and deliver their own thing, then their incentive is to get anyone out their way that is impeding them. Which means that if you've got two initiatives which need to run together, but they draw upon, let's say, a common resource, then my interest as a one person professional project manager is to fight for that resource and to shove the other person out of the way. But the other thing that you get is, and this happens in big organizations with a lot of project management, a lot of project managers within them, but at a much more strategic level, is if you imagine big corporation C has 20, 30, 40, 50, senior vice presidents across the world, each of whom has ideas for projects which will deliver value to the business.
Mm-hmm.
But the business does not have the capacity in terms of resources, in terms of budget, to invest in all of those. Now, if at the top of that organization C, they do not have someone who is controlling that portfolio and saying which of those projects are the right strategic projects for us now and allocating resources and closing down the others, then the projects that are likely to succeed are the ones that have the loudest, most pushy, assertive managers behind them. Whereas business D might have a few professionals who say, what do we need strategically? And they design a portfolio that balances everything. And suddenly the organization prioritizes and delivers the right projects. Scaling that down to your business A and business B, business A with project management running across it is able to say, right, now's the time for your project to come to the fore. And now's the time for your work stream to take and now I need you to help them. So you get exactly what you plan for. So what is project management about? Well, one of the things, you're talking about startups, and startups are about the most uncertain of ventures. A project, the US Project Management Institute defines a project as a novel endeavor that delivers products, services, processes within a deadline, and also with a limitation on resources, because projects, you may have a budget, you may not have a budget, you may be doing it on a shoestring, but even if you've got a budget, it's going to be limited. So a startup is absolutely novel. It is so you've got all that uncertainty. And what do we do as project managers? Our one mission in life as a project manager is to bring control to a chaotic environment. And what is more chaotic, what is more uncertain than a startup? Yeah. So the skills of project management are all about bringing together the people you've got and the resources you've got and using them to best effect, and making sure that you as a project manager and your client or boss or sponsor, in our case the entrepreneur and the founders who are funding this, they know exactly what is going to be happening and how their decisions are flowing through into actions. Yeah. Otherwise, it's chaos.
Yeah. And here's what's interesting. Here's what I find interesting. You can always pay attention. Software is, these startup companies, SaaS, software as a service companies, are really telling to where the market is, because they're often responding to their customer base. And what you see, I'll do some tech talk here, is from Notion to Airtable, ClickUp, I don't know about Asana, I have to double check, but I'm pretty sure Asana, you name the tool, they're all adding timeline and Gantt charts. Now, I'm going to be fully transparent and honest here, everyone. I usually just bypass all of that. I jump over. I was like, oh, Gantt chart. Okay. Anyways, Kanban and all these other views, and that's how I do it. However, I was recently burdened by having a project that my team and I were working on, and then I had another project external to me, and I said, man, I'm starting to get lost in it all. It's starting to be overwhelming. I have software, Mike. I've got ClickUp. I've got Airtable. I've got project management enabled tools, but somehow I'm still lost. And it was a friend of mine that she shared this spreadsheet that was a Gantt chart though. And she was like, Chris, this is how I stay organized. And this is how I keep on track, keep up to date with all of my projects. So I said, hey, wait a minute. Let me try this out. Now, I've never been the builder of a Gantt chart. I've been the recipient of a project manager having one and then telling me when things were due. So I was kind of playing the project manager role in this one. But Mike, I have to say, if these software companies are adding these features, that means there's demand for it. And then two, once I did it, Mike, for me, I'm a visual person. So I think that was the missing link. Instead of having a list of check boxes and due dates, my brain can't conceptualize what they really mean. But when I saw the Gantt chart and I said, okay, if we have all of these tasks outlined and connected and dependent, the day that we'll actually be able to finish it is this. And what if I take a week off and everything shifts? I was like, oh, and I could see the impact more visually. That was my process. And I feel that many entrepreneurs are missing this piece. They're missing this approach to things that marketers have really bastardized the name of. And instead of a project, now it's called a launch, Mike. Right? It's not different. It's the same
Rose
thing.
By any other name. I think it's interesting that you talk about Gantt charts, and Gantt charts are the poster child for project management. When you talk about project management, everyone thinks of a Gantt chart. But let me take you back to, you mentioned a whole load of project management tools.
Yeah.
and some that maybe you wouldn't think of as a project management tool, like Notion. But yeah, you can kind of throw names out like Asana, Monday, Jira, Favro, ClickUp, all these different tools.
Yeah.
And you and I know that there is no best tool. There are just tools that have what you need to do
Yeah.
your work, and then you pick, depending on your approach to selection. I always say, find the tools that do everything you need them to do, and then pick the one that has least friction for your users. Because,
Yeah. Yeah.
a tool that users don't use is useless. But actually, project management is the same. Ignore the software. There are a whole raft of different tools and techniques we use as project managers, and Gantt
Yeah.
chart is one of them. And some people are put off by Gantt charts, and you know what? That's fine, because it may not be the right tool, the right kind of thinking tool to help you to get a mental sense of control of your project. And in fact, one of the things I think that entrepreneurs will find difficult about the kind of project environment and why project management is so useful is when they start thinking about all the things they want to do, they get a sense of overwhelm. I want to do this, I want to do that, but I've got to do that as well, and I've got to get this done, and the lawyers are chasing me for this, and the accountants chasing me for that, and so you've got all this thing. And of course, project management is designed largely to take all the stuff you need to do and organize it.
Yeah.
And a Gantt chart is just one tool for presenting that organization. What it does is it takes all those tasks and it shows you how they pan out in time, which I believe, and you have found, for most people, is actually the most convenient way to think of it. And of all the project management tools, Gantt chart is the one that's most useful, which is why I think all the different softwares are building Gantt charts in. It won't be long before you start seeing the marketing automation tools starting to build Gantt charts in, or possibly you'll just say to their AI, build me a Gantt chart based on this automation, and it will. But I think we actually need to start right at the beginning of the project management thing and say, what are the steps that we need to take to build this startup or to build this project. And a lot of entrepreneurs will be familiar with the concept of a roadmap. Well, actually, what we often think of as a roadmap is really not a lot different to a simplified Gantt chart. Yes. So, but there are things on the roadmap that will make it so much easier to get from I want to build this business and I've got an idea through to launching a business and putting it into an operational mode. And even when it's in operational mode, we have marketing campaigns to launch, we have new products to launch, we have expansions to make happen, we have hopefully new premises to take on as we grow. So that those project management skills that you acquire as an entrepreneur or you bring into your team as an investment as soon as you can afford to, those skills and those processes will stand you in good stead as your business grows, and you will grow the range of tools you're using and the approach you take to managing a project.
Yeah, and you mentioned when you can afford to. I want to talk about two states of business. I want to talk about one state of business where you're profitable and you're really looking to optimize, become more efficient. Then you have the second one that we'll talk about. Well, hey, what if I don't have all of that money? What do I do then? But for those businesses, because even in my consulting, I'm often interfacing with the project manager. And whenever there's one involved, things just seem to flow smoother. So in that respect, if you have the capability, what are some of the telltale signs in your company? What would someone be experiencing? What are some of those friction points where there is a clear need or hole for a project manager?
I think that the obvious sign will be actually a sense of overwhelm, sense of I don't know what to do next. What's most important? That's classic. Yeah. Another thing is things go wrong and completely out of the blue and catch you by surprise. That when you look back at them, you think I should have known that. It's not like the markets collapse or there's an epidemic where the entrepreneur couldn't reasonably have predicted it, but you and I know that in an entrepreneurial life, you do something and you think, you know what, if I thought that through more carefully, that wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that starts to happen. You find that you've got lots of people, you've got lots of capacity, whether you've employed them or you're using them, but somehow it doesn't feel like they're all working at full stretch because you don't quite know how to brief them. But what you do find is that you, as the entrepreneur, are working late hours because you have to be feeding stuff to them for them to be productive.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
all of those kind of inefficiencies start to build up to a sense of overwhelm. And I come back to it. What project managers crave above all else is control, because that's what our job is to create. And the entrepreneur that doesn't feel they are in control of their emerging business is in desperate need of either a project manager or some project management skills to exert that control and to claim ownership of all the different tasks, to organize them, prioritize them, sequence them, and start getting them ticked off.
Yeah. And this is important because the question is, I felt this in the future that somebody was listening and was like, well, okay, but what does a project manager do? And I'll let you answer. And I think the question comes from, well, wait a minute, my VA does that, right? Wait a minute, my operations person does that. And what I would invite to the table for you to clarify is that a fair expectation to put that on your VA or put that on your executive assistant? Or is this a total separate practice that if you're a profitable company, this is the position you should be looking to fill?
Okay. Well, it is reasonable if your VA has project management skills to use your VA as a project manager.
Yeah.
They may market themselves as a VA with project management skills, or they may market themselves as a freelance project manager. It's also true that some personal assistants have or can acquire project management skills. In fact, on my channel, I interviewed a very inspiring American project manager called Andriana Marshall. And she is now an expert in Scrum methodology and a Scrum master. But she told the story of starting off as a personal assistant to her boss, who said, you know what, I need you to be managing projects. Let's get you some training and do that. So it is entirely reasonable.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I don't kind of say, there is a project manager person, and unless you are that project management person, you can't go near projects and manage them. But it's like everything. Anyone who has the willingness to learn can acquire the knowledge, start to practice it, and if they keep that learning mindset, they will increase and improve their skills and be more capable of taking on projects. But you did ask, what is it a project manager does for you? And I think that's the key. That's the key, because you can call yourself an entrepreneur, you can call yourself an ops director or whatever. Actually, project management is what you do, and I think it is best summed up in terms of the flow of a project, the different stages of a project, and what we have to do at each. But sitting over all of that, I think, is coordination of resources and activities. And by resources, I mean the people, of course, but also the material resources, the equipment that you need, the consumables and materials that you need, the money as well. I mean, money is the master resource. You can buy, it's what you use to buy all the other resources, including people. So you have kind of oversight of the resources and of the tasks. But the other thing a project manager has to do, and this is why there's as in your business, so in mine, AI is taking the world by storm, and people are saying, will AI do away with project managers? Well,
Interesting.
Who knows what the far future holds, or even the medium term? But in the short term, my prediction is that what AI will do is it will do away with the need for project managers and perhaps their assistants to be doing a lot of the administrative load of gathering data, collating data, analyzing data, presenting data, those sorts of things.
Yeah.
But the core of project management is about coordinating people to do things. And what skill does that require? It requires the ability to listen to people's concerns, to explain what you need them to do, and to work with them to create the environment where they do it.
Yeah.
Which, on the face of it, sounds a bit like an operational role. So the difference is that an operational person is going to be most comfortable when they've got an established process and they can make sure that that keeps running like a well-oiled machine.
Yeah. Yeah.
The project manager, it has that personality and that skill set that actually makes them comfortable building that process and refining that process and changing it day to day as the project evolves, as new people come and go from the project. So I think that's really how I see project management. And that's why I think, the operational mindset of we know how it's supposed to work, and if it's not working that way, we'll fix it, isn't quite right for project management, because the project manager's mindset is new day, new set of challenges. Let's work with the people we've got around us to address those, so that at the end of the day, we are not where we were. We are where we want to be.
Yeah, that's good. That's very helpful. And as you were explaining that, I was thinking, is it preferred? I have an answer to this. I'm interested in what the good doctor has to say first, though. Is it preferred that you get a project manager with experience in your industry, or is a project a project a project? Doesn't matter what industry you're in.
That's one of the biggest debates in the project management profession. Do you, as a project manager, need expertise in the industry and the sector? Mm-hmm. My answer has always been no. Project management is the discipline, and that's how I and I was a consultant, so I had no expertise in anybody's sector, and I went from sector to sector and project to project. But if you are going to make that work, you need, and we keep coming back to that, the learner mindset that says, right, I'm in a new sector. So first working day of January in 2000, I had rolled off just before Christmas a 2.5-year project preparing a huge UK-based what we call FTSE 100, equivalent of your Fortune 100 company, for year 2000. You and I will remember that the world was going to end when computers didn't know how to handle the date change. And it had been an exciting project. So 2nd of January, I flew out to Holland. I'm in the UK, to work on an internet startup. In 2000, it was going to be the first telecoms company to use to build a whole company from scratch based on voice over IP. It was probably about 5 years too early. So I had to manage a project which was about integrating huge ERP type systems. We were using SAP, we were using Siebel. I'm not even sure Broadvision still exists, so I don't know whether your audience will know Broadvision. Huge amounts of middleware to make it all work, huge technology, plus it was basically a telecoms business. I'd never worked in the telecoms sector. So the way I made that work is I arrived there, I found out who so I was working for Deloitte at the time, found out who the work stream leaders were, the experts at the top of each area of work from my firm. And over the course of 2 or 3 days, I had lunch or dinner with each of them. And I said, teach me about what you do and how it fits in. I started off with the systems architect. And I said, draw me a picture of the system we're making and explain it to me. And he drew what he called a pill diagram, basically all the different bits connected. And my purpose was not to think that I could become an expert in any of these things. My purpose was to know enough so that when anything cropped up, I knew who was the right person to speak to, or what domain I was in, and I could diagnose it. So my answer is that for most projects, you probably don't need to go into the project with that expertise of the sector, of the function, or whatever. But if you have that, it's an asset. Yeah. So if you are an entrepreneur and you're bringing in a project manager, ordinarily prefer someone with a bit of experience in your sector, or better still, I would say a near adjacent sector, because that gives you the sweet spot of they can hit the ground running perhaps only jogging, but they've got a little bit of transferable knowledge so they can see things from a slightly different perspective, because of course there's always a benefit to being able to bring
Yes.
in ideas from different places and say, well, particularly with a startup, you don't want your startup to look like a dozen and one other businesses in your sector.
Yep.
That's why you're starting up. You've got a new idea. So
Yep.
perhaps, but so I would say probably you don't need those skills, but I'm open to the fact that there may be some sectors where the value of having sector skills is far higher than in most cases.
Yeah, and I think I see it more in the tech space. For instance, for me, when I bring on someone in this capacity, it would be beneficial if you've managed a project where we're launching a course, running a webinar, things of that nature. Now, those aren't unique things; they're events,
Yeah.
right? They're events, they're products, they're things of that nature. However, there's intricacies. There's a knowing that, okay, if we're going to be using this if we're going to be running this webinar, maybe we need to have social media graphics done by this. And since you're integrating it with a certain software, like the small details, and I liken it to me, I'm in the field of automation. I feel, Mike, I really do feel like I can come into any business and intelligently, accurately implement automation. Now, what is my go-to? Well, I learned it going direct to consumer in a SaaS environment. So if
Mm.
you put me in that environment, results will come faster. Take me out of
Yeah.
that, put me in B2B. Can I figure it out? Yes. Will I figure it out? Yes. However, the time factor may be a little longer.
Yeah.
And I think that's the difference, right?
Yeah. And there's another parallel between
Mm-hmm.
your experience as an automation expert and my experience as a project manager. If you go into a business where you're not familiar with their line of business,
Mm-hmm.
you are dependent on having a client who can articulate their need clearly enough that you can say, okay,
Yes.
now I see what your strategy is. Now I see what you're trying to do. I can build you an automation. I can
Yep. Yep.
plan you a project that will get you there. But if you've got a client who says, well, I don't really know what I want, then your lack of sector experience means that
Yep.
you don't know what they should want. Whereas if you come in with sector
That's good.
experience, you can say,
Yeah.
right, here's a range of things that you could be aiming for. But you know what? I always think, be careful the clients you work for. If you've got a client who really can't articulate what they want, they're not really ready to buy an automation
Yep.
expert or a project
Yep.
manager.
This
There
is
was
true.
a slide that I saw that was at a presentation by a senior vice president. I think of. I'm going to remember. Am I going to remember which business it is? It's a big tech business and US tech business, but she's European
Okay.
senior vice president, I think. But she basically said, whenever you go and see a client, you need them to explain to you what it is they want, and because of that, AI is not going to take your job, because AI can't get someone to articulate their needs. Whereas a
Yeah.
good consultant, whether it's a project management consultant or it's a marketing automation consultant or any other consultant, is adept at asking the questions that draw out. And this is
Yeah.
you mentioned, kind enough to mention my book, How to Manage a Great Project, which is my kind of introductory book on project management. And it divides project management into 8 stages, and the first stage is, and they're all labeled by questions, and the first great question is, what do you want? You can't start managing a project until you know what it is you or your client or your boss wants.
Yeah.
And so the first skill of project management is helping your sponsor to articulate what success looks like, and why they want it. What are the benefits they're going to get
Mm-hmm.
from it, so they can
Mm-hmm.
later you can justify the costs. And that's exactly the same, I'm sure, when you're helping someone design a marketing automation. It's, what is it you want this automation to do? What's the goal of the automation?
Yeah. Yeah. And you just have to pay to discover what you need. And,
Yeah.
and you know, if you're bootstrapping, that may be a little harder to hear than if
Mm.
not, because a lot of times, Mike, and this goes global, is we want that perfect off the shelf professional just
Yeah.
to know everything, do everything, and not realize it's 80% relying on us to communicate. And if you happen to get somebody with your industry or domain expertise, they'll be able to fill in the gaps. Hey, you said this, but are you thinking about XYZ? To me, that's what really makes a solid project manager is you've done the best job that you can do to communicate what you know. And they
Yeah.
see holes. Like, oh, but have you thought of this? How about that? I think that's the sweet spot that you and let's be fair to everyone, sometimes they have to grow with you.
Mm.
They may not have all of that expertise, but as long as you're aware of that when you're bringing them on, whether it's freelance or in any other capacity, just understand that, okay, this is what I would like to see your existing skill set translate to as you learn my industry, right?
Yeah.
That's a different conversation. But
Yeah.
the other side of the coin is everybody's okay, great. We're enabled to go get a project manager. Let's go look, right? But then you have the other side of the entrepreneur that's listening that's like, wow, I mean, I can barely afford my subscriptions to my CRM software and XYZ. Where am I going to get this project management person? Oh my gosh, am I doomed? What tips do you have for the person who's not yet in a financial position to be able to bring on a project manager and maybe a freelance or part-time capacity?
Yeah. And if you really can't bring someone on, then build the skills in your team. I mean, that's
Yeah.
the joy of the modern world is that you can get training easily and cheaply. I mean, you can buy a book for $20 and read it and know, really what you need to do to know to get started with project management. You can
Yeah.
go to a website like mine. You can, or even to my YouTube channel and pick up stuff for free. You can go to the Udemy's or whatever. So there's lots of skills. Pick up those skills. Actually, the first step is to recognize value. The other thing, would be remiss of me if we're talking about project management, particularly in, you're in the tech space, not to at least acknowledge that there are two broad approaches to project management. So there's what I grew up with, which is now known as either traditional project management or predictive project management or planned project management, or what I consider to be a derogatory term but widely used, waterfall project management. The idea that we can figure out how to go from A to B in a series of steps. We know where we want to get to and we will plan that out. And that's how I grew up managing projects. And on the other side of it is what is properly known as adaptive project management, but most people call agile project management, or they label it with one of the frameworks or methodologies, the commonest, of course, being Scrum. Now, last year on my channel, before this year came along and it was the year of AI and PM, my catchphrase for the channel was all project management is hybrid project management. That is to say, if you have a mindset that says we either need to do everything in a predictive paradigm, we need to plan everything out from day one and follow that plan till we meet it, or you say, you know what, predictive project management is rubbish. We need an agile project that says we don't plan anything. We just do a week's worth of stuff and then we review and we do another week's worth of stuff.
Yeah.
I do not believe that the world works well when people take an extreme position and assume it is right. The world works best when we recognize the value in this case, the two different approaches, and then we create a hybrid that says, for this project, at this moment, in this startup, for what you want to do today, the best balance is here. And I'm going to draw tools from this, and I'm going to draw tools from that. Tomorrow, I may change my mind. So when you're looking either to train yourself up or train your team up or hire someone in with project management, the most important thing is that you either create or hire someone with skills at both ends of that spectrum who is prepared and able to draw on a range of different ideas. Because, if the only tool you've got in your toolbox is a hammer, everything starts looking a bit like a nail. And, the one trick pony is not going to not going to be flexible enough to deal with things. So,
Yeah.
yeah, get yourself some training if you can't afford to bring someone in. Or, you know what, a lot of, you know, if you're an entrepreneur, then if you're going to be a successful entrepreneur, then you're the sort of person you can talk to people. You've got networks in
Yep.
all walks of life, whether they're from college, whether they're in your current social life, whether they're in your business life, whether they're on LinkedIn, whatever social media you use. Reach out and find people who can give you a piece of advice. You know, where's the best place to start? Project managers, you know, are keen to talk about their professionalism. You know, if I come to you and say, you know, I've just got this, you know, I need to get started with automation. What's the one thing I need to start with to get me kicked off in the right direction? You'd be happy to give that piece of advice to a friend or
Right.
a colleague,
Yep.
and so would I in project management terms. So that's how to get started. But then I would say, once you start to generate some of that revenue, either take one of your existing people and give them more time and more focus on the project management,
Mm,
or bring someone into the team who is there to do that, so that your staff can go back to what they were doing.
yeah.
So bring it in incrementally, if for nothing else than to prove to you the value of what's happening here. You can, you know, it's that proof of concept.
Yeah.
Project management is no different to anything else.
Yep. Yep. And I'll say this, everyone, and I'm saying it to myself as well. Some of the skills that I've looked for and found be very helpful to me are process oriented skills. They have to be a process oriented thinker, and very organized, and a great communicator. And when I say communicator, I'm not talking about they can write a very formal email, or they've got good grammar. I mean, they ask clarifying questions. Hey, you said this was launching next week. By next week, did you mean Friday? Oh, wait a minute. I guess I just kind of threw next week out there, right? They really add definition to broad language and laziness that we kind of operate in the day to day of getting things done. Those are three core skill sets that I always look for in a person in that capacity. Bonus if those organizational skills translate digitally, and they can
Yeah.
be digitally organized. Oh my goodness.
Well,
Listen,
actually,
man.
that links to the a fourth one I'd add in, and it's linked to the communication. But
Hmm.
most project managers have to lead and really get people to do stuff without authority. And it's nice to think that, you know, if you're an entrepreneur, you lend your
Mm,
authority to the project manager, and everything they ask someone to do, they're asking with your authority. The reality is that's not going to happen, because
yeah.
there is that. So you need someone who can influence and persuade, who has that personality, those communication skills that can bring people on, whether it's stakeholders who might have a stake in what you're doing, or whether it's team members who would
Yeah.
really rather just get their head down and do their own thing rather than actually contribute to the other thing, which happens to be more important today.
Yeah.
Um, and and that links very well to the digital organization, because of course, if you can bring in the team members you've got available as a project manager and engage them to collaborate on the current project priorities, then one of the things you need to be able to engage and to collaborate on is a shared collaboration tool. Because if you can't persuade people to use the shared collaboration tool, then the project management becomes much more laborious. It becomes,
Yeah.
frankly, old school. The only way you can know what everyone is doing is by talking to everyone every day. Isn't it lovely now that when people comply properly, you can open up your desktop and just see what people have completed since you last looked at it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that will only happen if you can bring people into that. So, which
Yep.
is why I always say, pick the software that does what you need it to, and then choose the one that creates least friction with the team, because then they're most likely to use it.
Absolutely. Well, Mike, listen, this has been great. A lot of insight, a lot of stuff for me to think about. And listen, everyone, you don't always know everything that you need to know sometimes you just feel the pain. So hopefully some of the pain that we've pointed at that you've been experiencing in your business, you now are that much more informed on a path forward and perhaps a new professional on your team to explore new skill sets that you need to have or need to add to your existing team or yourself. Mike, if anybody wants to connect with you on YouTube, you've got a book, you're very well knowledged in this area. Where can they go?
Right. So the best place is to go to my YouTube channel, which is Online PM Courses, and there's new videos every week about project management. But on that channel, there are a whole load of videos about the basics of project management. If you want a structured course, go to the onlinepmcourses.com website. For your viewers and listeners who are entrepreneurs and want to get started with learning some basic project management, the Fast Start program is probably, it's 2.5 hours of videos that will get them in. If you're really committed, then go for the Skills Mastery program, which is about 6-7 hours of videos, which will give you all the skills you need to really get going. So those are the two places. But as always, I'm a professional, you're a professional. LinkedIn is the place where we get together. So
Yes.
find me on LinkedIn and mention that you're part of Chris's community or one of his listeners or viewers, and I'd be delighted to link with you and share my knowledge with you that way too.
Great. Appreciate that, Mike. And I'll say this, everyone, in case you didn't connect the dots, you can go through these PM courses that Mike has, or you can send the person on your team that you would like to acquire the skills through these courses. So again, think outside of the box. You've got help. You've got resources in this area. Mike, Dr. Mike Clayton, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast. I greatly appreciate it.
It's been a great pleasure, Chris. Thank you for inviting me.
Yes, absolutely. Listeners, thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention. See you all online. And until then, automate responsibly, my friends.